Welcome to Swords and Starships. I am your host, Captain Garrett, and I am here to review Stranger Things, Season 4. Put more accurately, Stranger Things 4. The fourth installment in what I consider to be the best series on Netflix. So let's just get right into it. This is a spoiler review, so I'm going to warn you right now if you have not seen the full season or volume 1 of Season 4, stop this, watch it, and when you're done with it, come back and get my take on it because I promise it'll be worth your time. I don't want to spoil it for you because it is good. It is really good, and I'm going to just dig in. So, you have been warned. Spoiler alert, spoiler alert. I have an odd. I'm not sure what to think sometimes about what the prevailing culture thinks about Stranger Things. I came to Stranger Things quite organically. I I think it was what, 2016 maybe. I was on my couch surfing through Netflix and here comes this splash page. I think I ignored it. Probably 4 or 5 times I logged in, and you know how it is. They splash something, you just ignore it and ignore it. And I was like, Stranger Things. It's kind of a curious title. Didn't really see anything that made me want to watch it. I don't even remember what it was now that made me hit play, but for whatever reason, I hit play. And, that first cold open, I was pretty much in. Like, it starts with a strange monster attack and then immediately cuts to four teenage boys in the 19, well, almost teenage boys, I guess. What, they're like 12 or something. Four boys in a basement playing Dungeons and Dragons in the 80s. And I was like, oh my God, this is so. Now, there's a lot of talk of nostalgia bait. And it's fair criticism, don't get me wrong. I think nostalgia for nostalgia's purpose is it's garbage, and I'm not in favor of it. I think it's lazy writing, and so I fully understand and embrace anyone who is tired of member berries and tired of nostalgia. However, there's also nostalgia that is done well, and when it's done well, I prefer to call it an homage. And I consider Stranger Things an excellent top tier homage to, frankly, for any time period, it's an excellent homage, but it is a great homage to the 80s. And that's because it doesn't just make you think of the 80s, it actually recreates the 80s in a lot of ways. So immediate, and I was pretty young in the 80s, but I was old enough to remember how things felt, and a little bit of the early 90s was still pretty 80s like. And so I remember just the way the world felt at that time, and this show nails it. And just the music was just super retro but in the best way. And then that title screen happens. This kid disappears and this weird something weird has happened, you don't know what it is, and then it's just this great as the Stranger Things, sorry, it was a terrible impression, but of the opening title credits. But that title crawl is like my favorite. I never skip it ever. It's part of the experience for me. And so I started watching it, and I got to tell you, that first season, and I think most fans of I think they all would agree, the first season is the best. It's flawless. I mean, I could critique a couple of things here or there, and I probably will at some point, but overall, you know, writing just don't get much better than that. They resolved pretty much everything in the story in this just powerful emotional way, and I just loved it. I loved how it was a mixture of sort of paranormal horror, science fiction curiosity, and also just coming of age fun. I love how it balanced all those different things. There was fun and joy and hope in it. And I love how it always, Stranger Things always seems to end on a high note, and I like that a lot. So I just blew through that first season, and I couldn't shut up about it. I went to work, I was telling it, you've got to watch this show, Stranger Things. This is before it had just come out, so there wasn't all this buzz about it. And I credit myself as at least, you know, the butterfly effect. I was one little butterfly just beating its wings, and it just created a hurricane on the other side of the world that is the entire Stranger Things phenomenon. Yes, I'm pretty much taking credit for all of it. Um, prove me wrong. Prove me wrong. Season 2 I liked a lot. Um, but it had some it was a little slow for me. But I enjoyed it because ultimately it ramped up to the right conclusion and it was a great conclusion. I mean, what Stranger Things does well is endings. It really does endings well. That's not always easy to do. It's actually one of the hardest things to stick is the landing, right? So, but here's where my confusion comes in. Some people who are fans of Stranger Things really hate season 2 and they kind of like season 3, or they really hate season 3 but they like season 2, or they just hate season 2 and 3 and they think it's been garbage ever since season 1. I don't understand any of those takes on it. I enjoyed season 2, I had my issues with it, but I loved season 3. And I know that there's going to be people out there who are just, hissing at that. By all means, in the comments, let me know, what are the reasons that you didn't like season 3? I genuinely am interested because I haven't actually heard a really good critique of season 3 because I have been curious. I'm like, okay, yeah, what did you not like about it? I really loved it. Let me first tell you, I know this is a season 4 review, but I have to set the table. Season 3, well, I like, first of all, that it was set in the summer because the previous 2 seasons were both in the winter. Well, technically, the second season was the fall, but either way, it was kind of like the winter-fall season. I liked how this was a summer story. They're out of school, and it kind of hit those notes that a lot of, like, summer movies had in the 80s. And, that's more like just the mise-en-scène that I enjoyed. And it had totally different color palette. So just stylistically, I really enjoyed the change. I thought that the actual storyline was better than season 2. The through line about... Okay, I do understand the critique of the Russians. I know that some people felt that the Russians were one-dimensional villains. That's fair. On the other hand, I liked the Russians because, frankly... I swear to God, this is what I expected. As soon as I saw the Russians, I was like, this is going to be a story about how the United States wasn't the good guy in the Cold War, and the Russians were actually kind of these sympathetic characters who were just defending themselves. I mean, I really just felt that was where they were going with it. And I was pleasantly surprised that the Soviets were portrayed as roughly ruthless thugs. I say Soviets, not Russians, but effectively Soviet Soviet soldiers, right? That being said, there was the character of, I want to say it was Misha, who was the Russian scientist that they kind of adopted later in the season. There was a lot of great nuance to that character, and I enjoyed that a lot. But yeah, they were kind of one-dimensional characters, and they could have done better on that. That's a fair critique. I also think what they did with Joyce and Hopper really bothered me. They kind of turned them into these cartoonish characters. Joyce and Hopper in the first season are my 2 favorite characters, bar none. Joyce is this warrior mother on a quest to save her son that is nothing short of just epic. I mean, it's just amazing. And Hopper is a great character because he plays against type. In the first season, he's the skeptic. He's the adult. He's the policeman who is never going to believe this crazy story. He just won't. And what's so charming about the first season is he actually starts to follow the clues and discovers, oh my God, something freaky is going on. And ultimately, he kind of leads the charge to discover, at least from the adult side of the story, what's actually happening. And if it weren't for him, Joyce would have possibly given up in her despair. And that actually is the one little passage of the first season I don't totally like I'm not going to get into it. But anyway, my point is they were serious characters. Season 2, still pretty serious characters. It almost the same exact through line with both of them. They're both trying, Hopper's trying to protect the town. Joyce is trying to save her son once again. I know you can't do that every time, but like in the third season, suddenly Joyce became this kind of loopy airhead, and Hopper became this kind of dopey, uh, this poor sap who's trying to, you know, can strike up a romance with her and not and he's wearing a weird kind of Hawaiian shirt and then they're always arguing. They're having these I hate when movies do this, these kind of fake arguments that these lovers quarrels that aren't really lovers quarrels. It's just like we just need the characters to have friction, so we just manufacture some. And they kind of turn them into clownish characters. So those are the two areas where I think season 3 missed the bar. But season 3 is a perfect act 3 in a 3-act story because it's about the Mind Flayer becoming the villain. Like we finally hear the Mind Flayers speak, and it's done in a sparing, very restrained and very well chosen way. And I really love the moment when the Mind Flayer is speaking through Billy, and he's kind of threatening 11, and it becomes a story about 11 versus the Mind Flayer, and that's just great. So that brings me neatly along to season 4. So again, I've pretty much been a fan all 3 seasons up to this point. Season 4, which was getting rave reviews, so I expected to really like it. I start watching season 4, and I'm surprised to find myself not too happy. You know, it was like the first couple episodes, I immediately started to feel there were some problems. It's like one thing that was happening from season 1 to season 3 is the cast was getting bigger, and that wasn't a bad thing. I liked a lot of the new characters like Max. I liked the introduction of Robin in season 3. I think Billy turned out to be a really great character. Paul Reiser's character was great. I loved Sean Astin as Bob. Oh, R.A.P. Bob. You were the best of us. But a weird kind of trend is beginning to take shape in season 4, in that the writers of Stranger Things seem to think that any character that survives from one season to the next now needs a full-blown plot arc and lots of space in the story. And we still have to introduce even more characters. So essentially what you wind up with is a super bloated cast of characters. I mean, it's so many, and it was so many characters, and they were having to jump between them so often in the show that I began to get literally confused from scene to scene, like what city we're in, because part of it's taking place in Hawkins, part of it's taking place in California, and they kept jumping back and forth. And then they had this plot about how 11 is excited for Mike to come to California and visit her. And so some of the characters are going to be on a plane going to California to visit. So this only further confused time and space for me, because suddenly I'm like, wait, has Mike gotten to California yet? Or is he still in Hawkins? Wait, was 11 going to Hawkins? I'm confused. And just the pace of the changing of the scenery, there wasn't a lot kind of visually distinct either between Hawkins and California, which I think was a missed opportunity. Like, it should have been really, I get it, public schools, there's not a lot of variety between them, but I think there should have been enough visual cues in the set design to make it obvious which location we're in, and usually Stranger Things is pretty good about that. I mean, they are in this season too, but just that element of it, honest to God, it just looked the same to me, whichever place they were. So that bothered me. And then we have kind of new characters that aren't really there doing very much. Like, I really don't understand Jonathan's new friend, the pizza guy. It's like he's taking up a lot of space and he says a lot of funny lines. And it's like we have too many comic relief characters. This is the other thing. They seem to have a tendency, the longer a character stays in Stranger Things, the more wacky and zany they get. The more they become sort of just a laughs character, and I don't really like that. You know, Joyce, you know, there's an element of Joyce's character that I think was fitting in the first season, which is that they imply that she's had problems with emotional breakdowns in the past, or that she suffers from probably some anxiety and depression issues. And it was not played as a joke in the first season. It was a serious reason why people doubted her story about her missing son. Like, that was important. And the idea was that this is just an element of her character. She has struggled with anxiety in the past, and why not? She's a single mother with a lot on her shoulders. And so all of that was really well constructed for her character. Fast forward to seasons 3 and 4, and they almost play it like, oh yeah, she's kind of loopy and taken to flights of fancy, and yeah, she just gets a little frenetic sometimes, and she gets a little flustered. And it's like, no, that wasn't her character. Her character was not that she's loopy and an airhead, because her character was, at times in her life, she struggled with anxiety and challenge, and that was a serious thing, right? So now they're kind of playing her for laughs. And then Hopper, Hopper was a gruff, kind of no BS kind of guy, and he just wasn't very interested in doing a lot of work. He was kind of lazy in the first season. That was an element of his character. Again, that was not done for laughs, although it was funny, and it was funny, and that's a good thing. It's like they took that trait and they just decided, okay, that's Hopper's character. He's just he's grumpy all the time. Now he's just grumpy. He doesn't want to do things. And so now he's grumpy all the time, and they always play that for laughs. And that was more of a season 3 problem. Season 4, oh God, I forgot. Yeah, he's in Russia for all that time. I can just tell you, the first couple episodes of Russia really bored the hell out of me. I didn't expect that. I really thought that would be one of the most powerful, awesome parts of the story. It does get there, but in the first couple episodes, it was watching paint dry for me. And a lot of it's because I could kind of see where this was going no matter what. So that to me is the biggest problem. They've introduced a lot of characters. It's a very bloated cast. They don't seem to have enough time to spend on all the new characters and all the old characters and the core characters. I mean, the core characters of the show are the 4 boys, Mike, Will, Dustin, and Lucas. And then you have Steve Harrington, Nancy, Eleven. Those are and then of course Hopper and Joyce. I mean, that's basically your core group. And that should always be the characters with the most to do and they should anchor the show. Always. Unless, of course, they're written out because they met a tragic end or something. But now you have Robin, and you have Dustin's girlfriend, in Utah. I forget her name. You've got the pizza guy. You've got, it's just, oh, and then you've got multiple Russians. They've stuffed this show with little Russian characters. I don't mean that in a pejorative way, like little Russians. I just mean like minor characters that they're sort of giving a lot of time to for some reason. But Hopper has the guard that's sort of his inside man, which is fine. There's some justification there. But then they also got the smuggler Russian pilot. I mean, there's so many characters, and it's fine. You can have lots of characters, but it's okay for not all of those characters to have a big part. This is the point I'm getting at. It's like they have this need to give every one of these characters a big part to play, and it's really just, it's making it, in the first 2 or 3 episodes, it's making it really hard to get invested, because the minute I'm starting to get kind of pulled in by one of the characters, bam, we're off to the next character. So I really actually, though, really like the Dungeon Master of the Dungeons and Dragons game, Eddie. I think that's a great addition. Oh, lest I forget, the bullies. I have got to mention this piece. Another group of sort of unnecessary, not totally unnecessary, but overemphasized characters that are blowing up the cast even more. And it's like you've got 4 or 5, I don't even know how many there are. There's probably 4 to 6, I'm going to say. There's 4 to 6 of the basketball kids that are on Lucas's team, and I'm disappointed. I'm disappointed to find that they are one-dimensional bad guys. They're basically, you're just picture the lowest common denominator of a bully character, and that's what they all are. And what disappoints me about that is that usually Stranger Things writes their characters with much more nuance and much more depth. Even Billy, who was a pretty mean and cruel character for most of his existence on the show, he was humanized. There was he was a victim of abuse. His father was abusive to him, and it had a lot to do with why he had become himself a bully. And there was a lot going on in that character, not just that element, but also just the element of he's a womanizer and why he was sort of like that. Like he was seeking attention through, hooking up with women. Those are all really great elements of his character, and they don't necessarily require a lot of exposition, really. Um, so there really aren't a lot of characters in Stranger Things that have one-dimensional character backstory, and these bullies are just another one of the. They always do the worst thing they can do to someone in every situation, and it's just boring. It's like I've seen this before. I don't need to see, and it doesn't pull at my heartstrings to see the most one-dimensional kind of character doing bad things. And I only spend so much time on that because Stranger Things, this is beneath you. You're a better show than this, and you've proven that. I think it's because there's just too many characters. I feel like if you trimmed it down and then invested a little more time in the characters that really have the important position in the plot, you'd be better off. And a little less of the crazy comic relief. Let your main core characters have more of the comic relief. You don't need the wacky pizza pothead. You just don't need that character. He's funny. He's likable. I'm not even saying they're bad characters. I'm just saying they're taking away from the characters I'm already invested in. And I don't think that's helping the storyline. So that's the bad news. Let's get to the good news. The good news is once the storyline starts to hit its stride, it does get pretty good. 11's story is, and I'm commenting on the whole arc from beginning of Volume 1 to the end of Season 4, Volume 1. 11 is fantastic. I love her story. One of the interesting things about her is that she begins the story as an outsider who wants very, very much to have a normal life. And, she's a child who's had her life stolen from her. So what's really amazing is now she finally has a normal life. She's in high school, and she's had, she's like the kid that was locked in the closet for most of their childhood. They haven't developed the social skills to interact. And so it shows, and kids are mean. And it's like, this is what she always wanted. And it's not quite the blessing that she had hoped for. She's trying to tell, a story about her father being her hero, that being Hopper. And by the way, that scene just slayed me. I mean, yes, I wept. I will deny it. If you repeat that, that's just between you and me, but I cried a little. Moving on. And the kids are making fun of her, and there's more bullies, I forgot. There's her bullies in the show, which are quite separate from the other bullies in Hawkins. And they're just, there's an interesting kind of homage, I think, to Carrie, the famous Stephen King film. Like, they're definitely drawing a little bit from that kind of thematic element. And then, well, the series, and I should back up a little bit. The series opens, the cold open at the very beginning of the first episode, and they had to put, a trigger warning on this. But it basically opens with all of the other research kids in Hawkins' lab being killed. And the show heavily implies that 11 did this. And I have to say, for the first half of this season, well, really up until pretty much the end, that was unsettling, and I did not like it. Not specifically the violence, because it's a fictional show. I will say it was uncomfortable to watch given recent events. So, and it hit me way harder than I was even prepared for. So that's the case. But I just mean that what bothered me about it is it felt like a retcon. It's like, oh, here we go. This is the thing that weak writers are always doing in shows now is when they want to make characters interesting, they give them personal trauma, which is always just the worst kind. Oh, this terrible, terrible, terrible thing happened to them. It's like, ugh, Does every character have to have some kind of terrible, awful trauma added onto their character to make them more interesting? No, they don't. And so my initial instinct was they're basically turning 11 into some version of like Carrie or a school shooter essentially, and I didn't like it. I didn't like it because it felt like it was changing the story. You know, if you're looking at the first 3 seasons, 11, whatever her sins were, they were fully fleshed out in the first 3 seasons. You know, her killing the guards in Hawkins' lab, like that was powerful and it had impact and it had meaning for her character. There was the beautiful passage of season 1 where she's like, I'm the monster. And the boys convince her she's not, that she's the hero. I mean, that's beautiful stuff. So she earned her right to be a hero in this show. She earned it through what she did. She earned it through her lessons learned. She earned it through her journey, and that's who she was as a character, a hero with a tragic and sometimes dark past who had earned her place as a moral character in the show. So now, if you go back in time and you just suddenly add this backstory that, oh, look, she may have murdered all these people in Hawkins' lab, it's like, well, now you're changing the whole thing. You're changing the whole DNA of her character. Now you're making her a different character. And if that was really in her backstory, that should have been dealt with in the first season. That should not just be dropped right here because it's, you know, you're going to get drama points. So I wasn't too happy about that. I also wasn't happy about the fact that, you know, 11 is being tormented by these bullies and Mike shows up and Mike is kind of taking the bully's side. He's either oblivious to what the bullies are doing or he's sort of taking their side. And I'm like, you know, this is not the character of Mike. I honestly think they've kind of ruined Mike's character a lot because in the first couple seasons, he was a leader and he was the guy that usually pushed everyone else to do something. He was the one that usually was insisting that they take a stand. And, you know, there's a character in It, the Stephen King novel, and in the books, Bill, that's who I'm thinking of. Bill is like, he's the leader. He's the leader of the kids that are trying to stop this evil clown. And I love that character. And I love how Stephen King crafted that character as the spiritual core, the glue that held the group together. That's sort of what I saw Mike as in the early seasons. And so now, because plot requires drama, he suddenly is totally oblivious of his girlfriend, who he deeply cares about, being bullied, and he misperceives it. Oh, they're just razzing. It's no, they aren't. No kid at that age doesn't recognize bullying when he sees it, especially when it's happening to someone he cares about. And if it's Mike, as they've created him as a character in the first couple seasons, he would intervene. That's his character. He does the right thing. He stands up for people. So not only is he oblivious, when it becomes obvious that she's being bullied, he doesn't stand up for her. And then when she goes overboard and smacks one of the bullies with a roller skate and splits her nose open, it's shocking to Mike, and he immediately looks at her like she's a freak, and he takes their side. Now, I'm not saying that it doesn't make sense that he was appalled by her act of violence. That is as it should be. I could definitely understand the shock, and I can definitely understand Mike saying, like, oh my God, 11, why'd you do that? But that does not for a second mean that he wouldn't be on her side and be supporting her, because after all, she was responding to these bullies, and he would be sympathetic to her. He would be sympathetic even if it was the wrong thing to be sympathetic with. I really mean that. Like, he loves her. You know, there's just, even if she did a bad thing, he's still on her side. And the show really abandoned, and look, they did, it makes for good drama that Mike suddenly, for plot reasons, does not take her side. Oh, she's so isolated. So look, I'm only going hard on this point because I actually feel it undercuts 11's character, because the arc of her having to fit in a school and not fitting in is brilliant. And her having to struggle with these bullies is brilliant. And her not having her powers and yet still resorting to a kind of violent counter response is also brilliant. I mean, those are all great elements. To have a character who should be on her side just for plot reasons suddenly abandon her and just to stack more tragedy on it, that's not brilliant. That's cheap, lazy, and it undermines Mike and it undermines 11. Fortunately, this is really the point in the series where it shifts into a really good place. One more thing before I move past that. I wasn't wild at first about the villain in the show. He's got this human-like face. He's kind of like got this skull-like face, and he speaks all the time. He's always talking to the characters, and I didn't like it. I didn't like it. It's too human. It was bothering me. You know, one of the things that really shined about the first 3 seasons of Stranger Things for me is the alienness of the Upside Down. The idea of this alien dark world that's right under our noses that we can't see. I mean, it's great stuff. And, you know, it was a singular, amazing moment when in season 1, when Barb is being dragged into the pool, and I'm like, what in the hell is going on? I hadn't figured it out yet. And then it hit me. I'm like, oh my God, it's an alternate dimension. It was just, the floor fell out from under. It was great. It was a great moment. It's like when Neo wakes up from the Matrix. It was just a great moment. And then in season 3, when the Mind Flayer speaks to 11, it was another great moment like that because the Mind Flayer was there. It was this malevolent presence, and it was implied what it wanted but never stated, and it was mysterious. It was like, what is this thing? And I liked that because it implied that this thing is sufficiently alien that even if it could tell us what it wants, it might just create more questions than it answered. And so it was so delightful when speaking through Billy, which is kind of a second-hand way of speaking it in the first place, the Mind Flayer speaks to 11 and basically says, that whole speech, I've watched it so many times because it's a great, great little villain speech. And it's just like, you let us in, and now you are going to have to let us stay. You know, and we are going to end you and all your little friends. And it's such a great little speech because even in stating what it wants, it's still being kind of vague and mysterious in the way that an alien might be. It's like if you could ask the alien in the Alien movie, what do you want? I guess it would probably say just to eat you or, you know, to cocoon you. But imagine it had a slightly more nuanced reason for what it's doing. It probably still wouldn't fully understand its reasons, even if it could explain them. That's probably a bad example. I guess the aliens are pretty much motivated by animals, but anyway, we're getting off track. Animal instincts, I mean. But anyway, I really enjoyed that scene because it implied that the Mind Flayer is offended. I love that element of it. It's offended that we have let it into our world and won't let it stay. I just really like that element because it kind of makes me wonder, well, why does it want to stay? You know, why is that so important to it? And I get the feeling that there may not be a good reason that we would understand. It's like, no, it doesn't want money. It doesn't want anything we would recognize in our world as a motivation. Its purpose must be some alien instinct for control and power. And I just like pondering that. I really enjoy that element. So when we get to season 4 and we've got, you know, the skull guy just going like, Max, you, and it's like narrating their life story back to them and torturing them in this very psychological human way. Now it takes all the alienness out of it. And that kind of disappoints me. It takes all the alienness out of it. In a way, I'm kind of reviewing the first half and my thoughts on the first half of Stranger Things 4 because I actually stopped watching it for a while because I was so disenchanted for all the reasons I've just gone over. And I was like, you know, I don't want to see the end of another thing I love. I really don't. I've watched Star Trek die. I've watched Star Wars die. I have watched shitty, awful Predator and Alien movie after another, prequels, sequels, requels, remakes, just again and again. And It's like a plague of locusts writers today. They find the next, you know, franchise they can buy and gut and vandalize and destroy it. And I'm freaking tired of it, man. I don't want to see things I love being destroyed. And so, you know, I'll admit I got a little freaked out. I'm like, I don't want to see the end of this where Stranger Things sucks now. I don't want to see that ending. I can't live with it. I'll just, you know, so I stopped watching it. But then, you know, I was checking out Geeks and Gamers. I was watching Friday Night Tights on Nerdrotic. I was still hearing good things. So check out those channels, by the way, Geeks and Gamers and Nerdrotic. Uh, and they were pretty into. I said, you know what? All right, I will watch it to the end, and I will see. I also talked to a friend of mine who she seemed to be really into it, and I actually don't think she had watched ahead of me, but for some reason, she kind of had this look on her face, like she kind of knew something I didn't. And so I sort of assumed, because she looked like, oh, you're going to like it, was kind of the look on her face. And it oddly convinced me, okay, maybe there is more to see here. So I watched the rest of it. And I have to say, the back half of the season really pulled it out and really got it, really stuck the landing. And I think that is one of the things that the Stranger Things writers have been consistently good at, which is crafting an ending with all the little plot threads that they create. You know, I used to watch that show Lost, and a lot of those shows where they would just the mystery box, you know, the J.J. Abrams mystery box, where they just would introduce a mystery and they'd never resolve it, or they'd resolve it in a really stupid or rushed way. Uh, you know, Stranger Things, I shouldn't have doubted you, because the Duffer Brothers and this whole crew, obviously, they don't introduce plot elements for no reason. They introduce plot elements for a purpose, and they carefully and meticulously weave all those elements back together at the end. And I truly admire that. I really do. So it turns out 11 was not the purpose. Spoiler alert, I did warn you. When it turned out that 11 was not the perpetrator of the attack, I was so happy, and more than happy. That's kind of all I wanted. That was like, I just want the prize at the end of this season to be that 11 was not Carrie. She was not the murderer of all these kids. Please don't let that be what it is. So the minute I realized that wasn't what it was, I was like, okay, good. I'm happy. I'm ecstatic. But then, uh, then they introduced this antagonist, this villain character, and I kind of thought they were going a different direction with it. I kind of thought, you know, because everything is so topical in movies and shows now. It's like in every show, they've got to do whatever stupid issue is trending on Twitter, they've got to do a story about. So I kind of thought they were going to do a kind of a story about people with power abusing kids. And so I kind of thought that the guy that was helping 11 was going to turn out to be like an abuser or something, which I also did not like, because it's like, oh, again, just piling tragedy onto her character does not make her more interesting, you know? So for just no reason, just pile more tragedy on her. So I felt that if that's where they were going with it, I wasn't going to be happy. I was so pleased that not only do they know how to write an ending, they know how to write a villain. Oh, do they know how to write a villain on this show? And man, okay, I'm going to just bear with me here. I got to IMDb this for you, because I need the name of this actor. I don't want to. Again, it's going to be spoiler heavy from here on out. So ending and everything. I may not say every element of the ending, but like I am going to reveal a pretty big part of it. So if you're not into that, then please stop watching. Honestly, if you have any interest in watching the show, don't let me spoil it for you. I want you to see it. It's great. Stranger Things. Oh man, that's a great poster. Man, it's such a big cast. It's going to be hard to find the guy I'm looking for here. Gotta love Google. I'll just type in the most flat out question. I'll just there. Yeah, Jamie Campbell Bower. Yeah, that's it. That's the actor who plays number one. Oh, is that perfect? I mean, I kind of saw it coming, but who cares? It was one of those. Yeah, I knew that was coming, but I didn't care because it was still so much fun. It was like, he's number one. But he wasn't just number one. In the hands of lesser writers, it would have been that was the gag. That was M. Night Shyamalan. That would have been it. It was like, yeah, he's number one. Ooh. No, they didn't just make him number one. They explained why he's number one. And it was through the story they had been building up all the way to that point. In fact, a lot of the elements I did not like at first, probably because I thought they're not going anywhere with this, or where they're going with it is going to be confusing and muddled. Oh man, it was like they were setting up this they were setting up this reveal from the first episode. Every single element you see related to the antagonist is setting you up for this. The time period, the backstory, the visual elements like the clock. I mean, every single element had an exact purpose in the origin of the villain in the story. And they reveal that number one is the villain who's been tormenting these kids from the beginning. And then they explain what happened between him and 11. That final episode, actually the last two episodes are just a flawless climax for all the characters. They all come together in just a really epic series of just intense situations they got to over. Oh my God. And this is one of my favorite things. This was one of my one critiques of the first season that bugged the crap out of me for years. And it was, how did Will Smith control Will Smith? How did Will Byers control the lights for his mother when he was stuck in the Upside Down? How did Will, because they showed that when you're in the Upside Down, in season one, they showed that when Hopper and Joyce are in the Upside Down, as they're walking down the hallway, in our world, the lights are turning on as they pass by. And at first I thought, that's pretty good. That explains a lot. But then the more I thought about it, I'm like, no, but when she's sitting there in the little cabinet with the lights and they're flickering, or then when she's got the letters on the wall and there's the Christmas lights and each one is going off, I had been hoping that I kind of hoped they would do this in season 2, and it was sort of what I was expecting. I thought they would do a flashback of Will in the Upside Down in season 2 that revealed some of his time there. I always thought that'd be kind of interesting, and I figured they'd explain it in that little backstory, but they never did. They never did anything like that. So they never really explained how Will was able to control the lights. It just, and in the fullness of the show, I could forgive that little oversight. I could live with it. They finally explain it in season 4, and the characters use it to communicate from the Upside Down to our world, and it's pretty awesome. Like, it's pretty spectacular. It's done well. It serves a purpose in the plot. It's not just done for, exposition purposes. Like, it's cool. It doesn't exactly explain how he was able to match the letters on the wall to the lights. I still don't fully understand that element of it, but it's very clear how he was able to manipulate each light individually. And so that's enough for me. You don't have to explain literally everything. That's pretty much enough to justify it. And it was a cool callback to the first season. Yeah, they know how to stick a landing on this show. I got to tell you, they know how to stick a landing. I think it was super cool, too, the reveal of, like, why the bad guy is crushing the kids. Like, why is he doing it? And it's so he can essentially steal their life energy to open another portal. Oh, that was cool. That was a really sweet reveal. And I like the new bat creatures in the Upside Down. They're pretty wicked. Yeah. What else can I say? I don't know. It's I guess so it was a rocky start. I stand by my critiques of the first. Well, I stand by most of my critiques. The ones that they didn't fix by the end, I stand by. Too big of a cast, too many characters stealing attention from the core group. There's the character, the conspiracy theorist, and his name escapes me at the moment. he was so good in season 2 as this kind of tinfoil hat guy who's at home, super paranoid about the Russians and the government, and he's ultimately the one that helps them expose the truth about Hawkins' lab, as a lab leak, so that Barb gets justice. And then, of course, in season 3, he's instrumental in translating, Russian for Hopper and Joyce. But they started doing the same thing with him that they do to so many characters in the show. They started turning him into a clown act. And like now in season 4, what's his name? Stranger Things conspiracy guy. Well, that's as good as any. What's his name? As his role as Murray Bauman. Okay. No wonder it's Murray. Okay, that's his name. It's kind of a forgettable name for a character. So, again, he's a supporting character who's turned into a main character. So this is part of my critique is like, why does every supporting character turn into a main character in the next season? And then you still add more. Game of Thrones could have benefited from that model because of the rate of attrition. It's like so many characters die every season. We need more. We need fresh blood. It's like Stranger Things. It's not quite that level of attrition. We don't need so many new characters all the time. Anyway, they're turning Murray into this clown act where like he's yelling all the time. He's saying over the top things all the time. Almost every scene he's in is played for laughs. Most of the time he's actually arguing against Joyce's theory about what's happening as if she's crazy. And I'm like, but that's not right for his character because he's the guy that believes in crazy. He's the guy that sat there and listened to Nancy and Jonathan tell him the whole story of season 1 and the Upside Down, and he believed it. It's like, yep. Whoa, I believe you. So how does it make sense that he suddenly is in the position of being like the voice of reason? It's like, I think they're fitting him into the Hopper role where Hopper is the skeptic, but because Hopper's not there, Murray is serving as the skeptic. Doesn't really make any sense. And then also, this is not Murray's character. He's not a loud, yelling, crazy, over-the-top guy. I mean, when he was in Hopper's office trying to convince the chief of police of his theories, he was making calm, reasoned arguments that sounded crazy, like his theories sounded crazy. Hopper, of course, knew he was close to the truth because Hopper knew he knew what had happened. And it was freaking him out because Hopper's like, uh-oh, this guy sounds crazy, but he's onto something and he doesn't even know it. So that was Murray's character. He was, and this is the other thing too, is he wasn't totally crazy. He was right about more than he even realized, and he was smart. He was actually putting together a lot of connections that other people wouldn't notice. It just so happened that he just, he didn't have enough to piece it all together. I think that's and that made him really interesting. It also is a fact that he served a purpose in season 2 that was super important. He served a purpose in season 3 that was not as important, but fun and mostly pretty interesting. He does serve generally a purpose in season 4 that is important, but it just is not, it isn't as well suited to his particular character traits of being, he's more of a mind guy. And they even have this sequence where he does all this crazy karate and it's also played for laughs. And it's like, okay, he's not an action hero. The plot needs him to be in this moment, and so he is. He's actually just a super smart tinfoil hat conspiracy guy who's closer to the truth than he realizes. I like that version of him. And if there's not enough for him to do in season 4, then leave him out. Don't just turn his character into whatever the plot needs him to be. So that's pretty much where my critiques land with this season is stretching the characters too far, putting too many, changing who they are as a character. One more thing, but let's leave on a high note. The Russia storyline did bore me for the first half because mostly it was just Hopper going through the motions of trying to plan an escape, and there's really only so much meat on that bone. Speaking of bones, part of his plan to escape is to smash his own ankle so he can pull his foot out of the shackle. And while that scene is harrowing and has some weight to it, that's really where it stops making sense, because for the rest of the season, the guy has just smashed his own ankle and pulled it out of shackle, and then for the rest of the season, he's able to limp through the freaking frozen wilderness in Russia with mostly no problem. And then even later, when he's pitted against fighting one of the Demogorgons, I don't even see a limp in that scene. It's like, I don't think they understand what it's like to have a shattered ankle. I mean, I don't think I had a sprained ankle once, and it was freaking awful for a week. I can only imagine what a shattered ankle is like. You can't walk on that. That's not an escape plan. I appreciate the writers. I appreciate what they were going for there, but that was not well thought out, and it didn't make any sense at all. It's like honestly, it would have been implausible if he were badly limping for the rest of the season. It still would have struck me as implausible. Like, let's just say for the second that Hopper truly believes this is the only way he's going to escape. Is this a good plan? You can't predict the shape that your ankle's going to be in. You can predict it's going to be broken and you can get out of the shackle, but it's not a science. There's no way you can predict how much damage you will have done and how immobilized you will be. It's like, it just isn't. And you have to escape on foot. Like that. If you didn't have to escape on foot, if there were a vehicle waiting for him and he knew that, it would make more sense for him to have that plan. But the fact that he knows he has to hoof it through the forest and just out of the prison and then he has a whole extended fight scene. It's like adrenaline you can get away with so much with adrenaline, but and he's a tough guy. I'll give him that much credit as a character, but yeah, it was a bridge too far. So, but that's the first half. Again, leaving on a high note. In the second half, leaving aside the implausibility of the ankle thing, the whole setup with him and the other prisoners being forced to fight a Demogorgon, and the scene in which Hopper has to explain to them what he knows about this creature, it was bone-chilling. It was great, and the action at the end is fantastic. So, rocky start, really stuck the landing, and it's pretty good. I won't call it, honestly, I don't consider it yet the best season of the show. I kind of still think the first 3 seasons are better for me, and I know I know there's a lot of nerds that really, I include myself as a nerd, don't get me wrong. I mean, there's a lot of kindred spirits that consider season 3 to be bad. I really, truly, someone in the comments explain this to me. I don't know why people don't like season 3, other than the reasons I stated. I can surmise, but those didn't bother me that much. It didn't bother me so much that I didn't like the season. I mean, who doesn't like the Battle of Starcourt? I enjoyed the heck out of that. Billy sacrificing himself and redeeming himself. That was all great. The Mind Flayer confronting 11. So, that's probably why I like season 3 so much. I mean, at the end of the day, also, I kind of loved the creepiness of just the idea that Billy's going around town zombifying all these people, and just one by one, people are mysteriously becoming part of the Mind Flayer's army. It just was creepy and cool and disturbing. I liked all that. So I don't know. I don't understand why. And I think part of why I don't find fault with some of those things, and I would love to hear why people didn't like season 3, but I think if there's one reason why maybe I differ from others who didn't like seasons 2 and 3, is my favorite part of the show remains the characters and kind of their life outside of the stranger things that are happening. I really enjoy, I love the scenes where they're setting up Cerebro on the hill, and they're building a ham radio, and they're having a blast, or they're playing Dungeons and Dragons. I love those are sort of my favorite little moments of the show. I love Eleven and her obsession with Eggo waffles, and how she's sort of finally has some kind of family life, and she's going to her first dance. It's basically these kids and these characters living their lives, and even in between the moments of darkness, there's joy, and there's love, and there's friendship, and there's beauty. And so for me, that was all there in season 2. It was all there in season 4, and fortunately it is also there in season 2, season 3, and season 4. It's there. And so as long as that's there, I'm probably not going to not like a Stranger Things season. I will say this. Probably, if the next volume is not the end of the series, I think the next season should probably be the swan song of the series, unless the writers, the Duffer Brothers, are absolutely confident they have a great story to tell for a Stranger Things 6 or 7 even. Unless they are rock solid confident, they're like, no, trust me, you'll love what we have in store. I think it's time to think about landing this bird. I don't want to see it overstay its welcome, because it's a beautiful series, and season 4 made me a little nervous at first. So, but I am happy to tell you, Stranger Things 4, I highly recommend it. The ending makes the whole journey worth it, and it's fantastic. So I'd love to hear your thoughts as well. I hope you liked this video. If you did, please like and subscribe and click the notification bell. And whether you enjoyed what you heard or not, I really appreciate you listening. And as always, I will see you out there.